Hey ghoul, hey! Over the summer, I took a commission to make a grand pannier that will be worn under a Glinda the Good Witch gown. I did a video on how to make a grand pannier back in the spring of 2020, and I figured since I had this opportunity to make the same thing again, why not try and see how my editing and filming skills have improved since 2020 and remake the video essentially. This video really is mostly just for me, but I figured since I'm making it, it would be fun to share it with you all, and for those of you that have been around the channel since spring of 2020, you can get to see the growth as well and be like as excited as I am that I finally moved out of my time-lapse phase and into my here's what the fabric looks like phase. And since I took this commission, I figured it's time to share with you all that I am opening myself up to very limited commissions this year. I have linked a form below for those of you that are interested in hiring me for a commission. I'm only taking very few commissions, mostly because my goal for commissions are to raise enough money to go to the Fête Gallant in 2026. You might have seen my 2 videos on the Fête Gallant over the summer, one describing the gown I made, just showing off the experience, and then a second one more sit down where I break down like how much it cost and the actual event itself. So I clearly liked going. It was a dream come true to go this past summer, and now I have the opportunity to go with 2 friends in 2026. Obviously, I want to go back, and I'm going to go back. If you want to be a part of that journey with me, you can check out the form below. Let's talk about the pattern and materials used for making this monstrosity before we actually dive into the making of process. If you are interested in hoop skirts in general, I have a video. I'll link it as well. This is a video on materials, the reasons I use the specific materials I use, how I made it, all of that stuff. In the video, I make a hoop skirt that can hold over 30 pounds of dress. If you're interested in hoop skirts, check that out. Starting with the pattern. For all of the pannier that I've made, I start with Simplicity pattern 3635. I've been using this pattern since 2015. It's a really good pattern. I don't think it's in print anymore. You can still find it on Etsy. It's very expensive. So a couple of the other options, Good Hunter Designs on Etsy has a pannier pattern as an option, as well as Corset and Crinoline, the book, has a pannier pattern as well. I haven't used them personally, so I can't speak on like how good they are. The material list for this pannier is pretty short. I used cotton broadcloth. I believe I used Kona cotton, and I purchased it on Etsy. I will link the exact color I used below. You can purchase your own bias tape for it. I made it. You'll see in the construction. You also will need satin ribbon, boning. I use hooping wire for this. I use hooping wire for all of my structures. It's just stronger and better. Yes, it's more expensive. I used dress hooks. So yeah, those are the materials that I use for this. Obviously matching thread as well. Maybe it's not obvious. I used matching thread as well. I'll link it all below though, so you can check it out for yourself.
Right from the beginning, I did some math and added 12 inches to each side of my pattern pieces, and the top trapezoid piece needs to be adjusted so the gradient doesn't slope too fast, but once I have done all of that math, I cut my fabric. This math will vary depending on which pattern you use, but this is the math that I used specifically for the Simplicity pattern. All of the seams on this pannier are flat-felled seams. Flat-felled seams are really strong seams that can take a ton of pressure like boning and the weight of skirts. They will also make sliding the boning into the channels easier since they are flat, where French seams have a fold on them that can block the boning from smoothly gliding through the channels. This means that I am going to sew 2 pieces together, wrong sides together, at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to press my seam open, trim one side of the seam, I chose the left side, and fold the long side over the short seam and fold it inside itself, encasing the short seam and stitching that down. I repeat this for all of the pannier panels. After an eternity of adding side panels and then sewing the front half to the back half, I can finally move on to the yoke, where I'm going to double hem the tall end of the yoke, add a gather stitch to the top edge of the yoke, and flat fell the bottom edge of the yoke to the front and back panels of the pannier. I double hem the side panels down, and then I finally double hem the bottom hem of the pannier. I personally like to press these edges down before taking them to the sewing machine because it looks cleaner and crisper and also sews incredibly when I do it this way. Now I have the main fabric portion of my pannier, so let's make some matching bias tape. Making your own single fold bias tape is not a requirement for making a pannier, but I made my own so that it would perfectly match the fabric that I bought, and now that I think about it, I technically made binding, not bias tape, because I didn't cut my fabric on the bias. For the purpose of this garment, it's okay that the boning channel doesn't have the stretch you get from cutting fabric on the bias, so I cut strips of fabric 1 3/4 of an inch wide with my rotary cutter. I stitched all these strips together to make one very long strip. And finally, I pressed both sides in, which also took an eternity. And then I wrapped my bias tape on cardboard to keep it organized until I needed it.
Moving on to the waistband. Something I learned from the last grand pannier that I made is that the typical tie around your waist style waistband isn't strong enough to stay up on my hips. And so I have since changed that pannier, but also for this grand pannier, I'm going to be making a waistband that has two halves, a front half that gathers all the front part in, and a back half that gathers all the back half, and then they actually connect with dress hooks. So the size of the waistband and the strength of the dress hooks really help it stay in place where I want it, and it also sews all of the gathers down so that they are basically stuck gathered perfectly the way that I want them to, versus the string tie. It can move and manipulate, and like, again, it just falls down. That is kind of like the difference between this waistband and the previous one.
I started by pressing the short sides in and sewing them down. Then I pressed the waistband in half, hot dog style, followed by pressing one of the long sides in by 1/2 inch. Then I pinned the center of the front waistband to the center of the pannier and gathered so that the top of the yoke fit into the waistband. I repeated this on the back piece, and then I stitched this down. Now I was able to fold the waistband over, pin it to the inside of the yoke with the folded edge on the inside, and sew that down as well. The last step is to hand sew dress hooks into the waistband, but I saved that until I was all done with the piece.
Let's add our binding to the main piece. I'll be really honest, if I could redo this, I would actually change the order of operations on this segment of the pannier. Instead, I would actually mark my ribbon and boning placement before adding the waistband, because once I've gathered down the waistband, the fabric doesn't lay as flat anymore, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult to mark things. That's it. It's just an ease thing, but still, I would have chosen to do these the opposite way. I've also lost my notes on making this, so I don't know the exact measurements of boning and bias tape used on like the certain parts of the pannier. However, if you have the pattern, you can just measure it out yourself. That doesn't help you when you order things prior to making it, but if you are patient and you order your boning after making your casing, you should be fine. And then of course, the simplicity pattern specifically tells you how much boning and bias tape you need to purchase. But again, if you're adding the like adjusted width that I added, you'll have to actually do all of that math on your own. So I do apologize, but that's just where we're at with this.
The first thing I did was fold over the edge of the binding and pressed it so that I would have a nice clean edge. Then, starting at the bottom of the pannier, it looks like I used my ruler to place the binding above the hem, and I pinned the binding on each side to keep it from unfolding. Sewing this down took some extra sewing table space. Luckily, my Arrow sewing furniture has me covered. Use code Casey to get 20% off, link in the description. Once my boning channels were placed, I added the ribbon, and now I can start adding the boning. I literally only have one clip of me feeding the boning into the channel, and then no clips of me tying the ribbon or adding the boning connectors, but I did all of that as well, and now here's the final piece.
made my Grand Pannier over 6 feet wide, it took up the majority of my living room, which is quite comical when you actually like think about it. Making structured undergarments is not really difficult. It's just a lot of tedious steps that take a really long time. I made this in 2 business days, so between 16 and 20 hours of work, and since I've made these structures before, there really wasn't any troubleshooting or anything like that. There was really just making sure that it fit the waist of my client and that it had the right proportion of width to their height. That was the troubleshooting, was making sure that it fit the person that's gonna wear it. Pretty easy, again, for me. I've made these before. If you are interested in commissioning me for a ball gown understructure or even like an embroidery kit or an embroidery design, please fill out the form below and we'll get chatting. And I guess I will see you all back here in 2 weeks for another small project type thing. I'm being so vague. I mean, you all know Anne Boleyn is coming, but she isn't gonna be here in 2 weeks. She'll be here probably in about 4 weeks. But in 2 weeks, we got something fun. I'm trying a new skill. Y'all. It might be chaos. We're gonna find out together. And if you like my channel or my content or these videos, I am attempting to do live streams this year. Not often, maybe 1 to 2 a month, but I am going to be doing live streams, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you're notified when I go live, so you can come and sit and be cozy with me while we hand sew or hand embroider. That's that. Also, you know, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Comment below, tell me what you're working on or what's your next convention. And I guess until next time, stay spooky, friends.